Good afternoon. Danielle, who have we got here? And friends in the room. Where'd Deborah go? Oh, good. Okay. Sorry. It's an exciting day for the Green Party. For the first time to be able to introduce a caucus of 3 Green MPs. Je suis tellement heureuse d'être ici avec mes collègues, le député de Nanaimo Ladysmith et puis le député de Fredericton. Aussi, avec moi aussi maintenant, c'est mes deux chefs adjoints, Daniel Green, puis Joan-Ann Roberts. I want to start by acknowledging that we're on the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin peoples, and to them we say Miigwech. I'm going to start by giving the podium to the newest Green MP, Jenica Atwin of Fredericton.
Merci à toutes et tous pour être ici aujourd'hui. Je suis très fière d'être le député élu de ma circonscription de Fredericton au Nouveau-Brunswick. Les derniers jours ont été enrichissantes et revigorantes et je suis confiante d'avancer avec cette équipe extraordinaire. Nous avons beaucoup de travail à faire. Nous devons être courageux et nous devons nous concentrer sur les enjeux les plus pressants, la crise climatique et les besoins de notre système de santé, en particulier la crise en santé mentale et le support pour le soutien 554 sur ma circonscription. I'm very excited to be here in the Capitol representing my home riding. I would like to take this opportunity to thank everyone who has reached out to show their support and encouragement to me along this journey. The last few days have been enlightening and energizing, and I'm ready to get to work. There's certainly a lot to tackle, the climate crisis, improving primary health care, and advocating our support for Clinic 554 in the circumscription, or the home riding of Fredericton, and supporting those living with mental illness. These have been incredibly important for me, and they will continue to be. I feel very fortunate to have the expertise and the passion of both Elizabeth and Paul at my side on this journey. We may be a small caucus, but together we are certainly mighty. Thank you so much.
Thanks, darling. And very happy to bring back the re-elected Member of Parliament for Nanaimo Ladysmith. I want to say something about Paul and Jenica before I pass it to Paul. I know not every single candidate for the Green Party across the country, but of Greens, I probably know more of our candidates personally than anyone else. But it makes me so happy that I actually talked both Jenica and Paul into running. I personally twisted their arms. So I couldn't be happier than to have the first caucus in the history of Canadian Parliament that I know of, other than when I stood by myself as a 100% female caucus. This is the first caucus of more than one where women outnumber the men. But we love Paul anyway. So Paul, your turn. Step on up.
All right. Well, it's an honor and privilege to be here as the re-elected member for Nanaimo Ladysmith. I'd like to thank the constituents of Nanaimo Ladysmith for putting their confidence and trust in me once again. It's not even 6 months ago that the Green Party only had 1 member of Parliament in the House of Commons, and now we have 3. And in this election, we doubled our vote count. So it's exciting times for the Green Party. We had a good weekend with our shadow cabinet and federal council. Really interesting meetings, excited about moving forward. I have my work cut out for me. I live in a riding that has the highest homelessness per capita in Canada. In our region, we have the oldest population per capita in Canada. We're dealing with an opioid crisis. We're dealing with a mental health crisis. We have an affordable housing crisis. And we're dealing with a climate crisis. So our forests are dying. The rivers were in drought stages really early in the year this year. People were having to move salmon up rivers by hand. We were lucky we didn't have a heavy forest fire season. So my work for me is really cut out in this Parliament. And I'm looking forward to working with Elizabeth May and Jenica. And Elizabeth has shown what a Green Member of Parliament can do over the years, voted hardest working Member of Parliament, most effective constituency MP year after year, and Jenica and I are going to be working hard to try to take that record from her. So I'm looking forward to this coming Parliament and working really hard with this caucus. Thank you.
So, thank you, Paul. Thank you, Jenica. Merci à mes collègues. Je vais quelques d'autres annonces au sujet de l'avenir pour moi-même. Je suis ici joignée par mon mari, John Kidder. I didn't forget to introduce him exactly, but he's here for reasons which will become apparent. We are very happy to have found each other at this stage in our lives, and I actually would like to live long enough to enjoy it. So there are a couple of announcements. First of all, there's been some speculation, not without reason, that I might run for Speaker of the House. As I said when Hannah Thibodeau asked me the question, it all depends on what my caucus colleagues think. My number one loyalty is to Paul Manley and Jenica Atwin, and to be there for them. And frankly, they don't like the idea of me being in the Speaker's chair, treating them impartially like everybody else in the House of Commons. So I'm very pleased to have certainty in my life about a few things. One is that I'd like to run for Speaker after the next election. So for now, I'll be in my spot, wherever that is, working with Paul Manley and Jenica Atwin to prove what three hardworking Green MPs can do. Particularly on the climate crisis, at least I'll be attending COP25, now moved to Madrid. Je suis absolument engagée, comme toujours, d'agir contre l'urgence climatique. On doit le faire. The other thing that I want to make very clear is that I am at last able to announce something clearly that many of you have suspected, because I've hardly hid the fact that I anticipated that after the 2019 election, I would not be continuing as leader of the Green Party. I want to choose my own time of going. I want to choose a time when we've done better than we've ever done before, with over 1 million votes, doubling our vote in Quebec, with 49 campaigns that got more than 10% of the vote, and some very close ridings where we hope, given this is a minority parliament, that we'll probably be going to the polls again, maybe 2020, more likely 2021. But I want to make sure that when I leave as leader of the Green Party of Canada, we've got momentum, we've got growth, we've got exciting leadership, and I know we will have all of these. As of today, effective today, I am no longer leader of the Green Party of Canada, and the new acting leader is Joan-Ann Roberts. I'll introduce her in a sec to say a few words. I'm staying as parliamentary leader of the Green Party caucus. I'm very excited about this. I wanted to choose a moment when we had a lot of success before leaving. And we have a leadership race already planned and a convention planned. Well, details of the leadership race are not yet public, but just to mark it down in your calendars, I hope you'll all come. In Charlottetown, October 2nd, 3rd, and 4th will be the leadership convention. And so by October 4th, 2020, Canadians will know who the best choice is going into an election campaign, that the Greens will have a new leader, a large and invigorated membership, with me still running, but not as leader. Many of you in this room know me well enough to also know my daughter. So I want to say that this is not something that is a new decision. I promised Kate in about 2016, when I decided I was going to have to stay on through the 2019 election, I absolutely swore to her. Last time I promised, she said, Mom, if you change your mind. So last time I promised her in 2016 the 2019 campaign would be it. And unlike politicians who say, I want to spend more time with my family and then go off sadly, I'm very excited to know that I'll have time with my husband and time with my daughter and my extended family, and that I keep my promises, especially to my daughter Kate. So maintenant, je suis tellement heureuse parce que nous avons le moment de passer un flambeau vers quelqu'un nouveau comme le prochain chef. Mais maintenant, pour la période d'intérim, mon cher ami et collègue Joan-Ann Roberts est maintenant le chef du Parti vert de Canada. Here you go, Joanne. Take it away, honey.
Je pense, merci. Bonjour tout le monde. this is a position I take on somewhat reluctantly. I joined the Green Party after a long career as a journalist because of Elizabeth May. So it is very difficult to think that even on an interim basis that I would try and fill her shoes. So I think I'll just try and keep the shoes in place while we prepare for a leadership race. We're getting an outpouring, because we told our membership before we came here, of love and support for Elizabeth May. This is a woman who came in with a group of political activists and created a national party that could hold its own on the national stage, and she has ignited a movement across this country. And for that, I know that Green Party members are forever grateful, but I do believe Canadians are grateful. So there'll be a lot more time for us to pay tribute to Elizabeth. For now, in the Green Party, the focus is to start the search for the person who will take the Green Party into the next stage. This is not a replacement for Elizabeth May. I don't think anybody would be up for applying for that job. But I do believe that we're at a time of excitement and renewal and going forward, and Elizabeth has done such an amazing job of getting us there. So as interim leader, I'm still getting used to that idea. It is my job, along with our deputy leader, Danielle Green, who will be concentrating much of his efforts in Quebec. So we will together be working to bring about the excitement that will lead to the next stage for the Green Party of Canada. Danielle.
Je connais Elisabeth May depuis les années 70. J'ai travaillé avec elle. On a fait des batailles environnementales ensemble. Et c'est avec un pincement de cœur qu'on apprend tous au pays le départ d'Elisabeth May comme chef du Parti vert et le remplacement de Joan-Ann Roberts, avec qui je travaille depuis plusieurs années. C'est un passage. C'est un passage qui a été fait selon les conditions qu'Elisabeth, c'est elle qui décide de partir. Elle part dans ces conditions. Elle a servi le pays, elle a servi ce Parlement. Et je pense que l'histoire va être écrite, que le Canada, le Parlement, la démocratie est un endroit meilleur après le passage d'Elisabeth May. Merci.
Alors, nous sommes prêts pour les questions. Il y a Julie.
Hi, can I just ask you then, so just to be clear, you made a promise to your daughter, but you also kind of pointed out your rich personal life. So
Yeah.
what was the motivating factor?
The promise to Kate. John might have wanted me to stay on longer. So I promised Kate. And I also have to look at what's in the best interest of the party. When you start actually looking at the clock and figuring out, okay, a minority parliament, how long do they usually last? 2006, Stephen Harper's first minority went to 2008, right? So you start thinking, if we're not ready for another election in 2 years, 18 months to 2 years, I mean, there could always be something fluky, but I don't see it, honestly. So if you don't actually think through what's in the best interest of your party, and I am very committed to the Green Party of Canada, I'm very committed to all of my colleagues in the provincial, BC, Ontario, PEI, Nova Scotia. Joanne got such a good result in Halifax. So when we look at what needs to be done to build for the next election, you can't postpone the decision. It just makes sense. So it was a combination of, yes, I promised Kate, for sure I wasn't going to run again, but the question was, when do you then step down? Frankly, the sooner the better. We have momentum. We had a great gathering this weekend. It was mentioned by Paul that our federal council had a regularly scheduled meeting, which meant Greens were in town face-to-face from Yellowknife to St. John's to, and the youth movement was there, like dear Avery and Stuart. So we have youth members of council. We have the full council gathered, plus our shadow cabinet, which was over 25 people, most of whom were also candidates, plus our 3 elected Greens in a caucus. It was the perfect opportunity to say to everyone, I want you fully engaged in this decision. I want to step down right now, and this is how I see a leadership race rolling out. What do you think about it? So it was what's best for the party. I'm convinced it's also what's best for me personally, and I promised Kate.
vous
Qu'est-ce qui
expliquer
vous
en
fait
français
dire?
pourquoi vous avez pris cette décision de vous en aller maintenant alors
Ouais.
qu'on vient d'avoir une élection?
Oui, c'est à cause de, c'est clair que dans un Parlement minoritaire, ce n'est pas un grand niveau de, ce n'est pas certain à quelle date serait la prochaine élection, le déclencher de notre campagne. Je suis absolument certaine que je vais présenter encore comme député pour le Parti vert du Canada à Saint-Gilles-de-Golfe. Mais je pense que ce n'est pas chaque mois. So my daughter looked at this also as for my health. She said, "Mom, you can work like harder than anybody's ever seen, but it's not good for you." And really, so I knew two things. Maintenant, je suis engagée et pour moi, c'est important pour moi-même de faire le moment de mon départ quand nous avons fait un grand résultat. Nous avons réussi partout au Canada et maintenant avec 3 sièges. C'est un moment historique et on peut imaginer que la grande majorité des politiciens tient pour trop long leur position. So too many politicians go out at the moment that everybody wants to kick them out the door. That's not happening here. And I like picking a moment when things are going well because I believe in this party. I want to see a lot more seats elected at the end of the next election. I'm quite sure we will. Ouais.
Pourquoi, à ce moment-ci, vous pensez que vous avez plus qu'il faut pour mener le Parti vert à la prochaine étape? Et qu'est-ce que ça prend pour mener le Parti vert?
C'est seulement une question un moment pour augmentation du parti. La course à la chefferie est toujours bon pour le parti, particulièrement pour moi-même, dans mon expérience, comme j'ai fait la décision de quitter le Club Sierra du Canada et présenter comme candidate dans la chefferie, pour la course à la chefferie du Parti vert du Canada. Nous avons eu 3000 membres. Et dans la course à la chefferie, nous avons doublé. C'est bon pour l'augmentation, la croissance du parti d'avoir une autre approche avec nouveau leadership et aussi pour une revitalisation dans notre équipe aussi.
Ça prend un rajeunissement du parti?
Encore oh, c'est pas clair. Parce que je connais quelqu'un qui pense à la chefferie, pas si plus jeune que moi, mais presque tout le monde est plus jeune que moi. C'est une question pour les membres. C'est un moment pour choisir quelqu'un d'autre. Je vais rester comme collègue, membre, fidèle aux les objectifs, les valeurs du Parti vert du Canada toujours. Peut-être une autre génération plus jeune, pourquoi pas. Peut-être un autre visage. C'est une chose importante d'avoir le momentum et avec quelqu'un nouveau.
Should you have stepped aside sooner? Because people were projecting that your party would have won more seats in this election.
If what?
People were projecting that your party was supposed to win
Yeah.
more seats in this election. Should you have stepped aside sooner?
I don't
before
think
this election?
I don't think so, David. Honestly, I think that the being chosen, I think it was an ECOS poll that Canadians saw me as the most ethical leader. All of those likes and dislikes numbers that Nick Nanos kept adding up, if those are true at all, I had a higher degree of popularity and more positives than negatives. I don't know if any of those things are true, mind you, but I mean, Nick says they're true, and I'll take his word for it. So I think I am a popular leader. We had a good campaign. We had some very strong headwinds in terms of negatives. I'm not going to go back over it because I have to find a way to work with the other party leaders in the House. So I don't want to talk about dirty tricks. But we do know that we did better than we've ever done before. So I think now is the right moment.
You talk about a great success, but then what do you say to those who say that you failed to translate some of that wave, some of that momentum into actual seats at a moment when climate change was top of mind for many?
We achieved more than 1 million votes for the first time ever. We have 3 elected MPs in a first-past-the-post voting system. and I'm very close to my Green Party colleagues around the world. There is no other country with first past the post that has achieved as much in the Green Party as we have in Canada.
When the goal was between 4 and 12 seats, you know.
Well, that was not, I'm sorry, that our goals were, my hopes were higher. I'll put that, in terms of tangible goals, they weren't different than what we achieved.
I'm wondering if the petition launched last week to start a leadership race might have pushed you over the edge of it.
It had no factor, it was not a factor in the least.
What do you make of it?
Sorry,
What do you make of the petition, though?
it's not relevant to me at all. Thank you.
How do you want to be remembered as a Green Party leader? And what do you think your greatest achievement was, and what was your biggest disappointment?
It's sort of like that question, Woody Allen, do you want to achieve immortality through your films? No, I want to achieve immortality by not dying. So I'm actually not done yet, right? My colleague, and as I said, if I look around the world at other Green Party leaders, Carolyn Lucas is one of the most popular members of Parliament in the Parliament of Westminster. She's the former leader of the Green Party of the UK and Wales. I'm not stopping my work. The climate crisis is as critical as ever. So I'm not going away as part of a political force and a political movement in this country to get real climate action, which none of the other parties, lamentably, not one of them, understands the urgency and is prepared to do what needs to be done. So we'll see. I'll leave it to others for how I get to be remembered. I don't feel that I'm actually leaving. I'm not leaving national politics. I'm not leaving the Parliament of Canada. And I do hope to continue to play a constructive role, and particularly in the leadership race to come. Obviously, I'll maintain neutrality throughout the race, but I want to encourage people who voted Green to think about getting involved, join the party, help us pick our new leader, speak up for what you want to see in the next leader of the Green Party of Canada.
Il y a des gens qui ont you've been thinking about this kind of stuff.
I guess what I think is an important achievement so far, and I still have more time to serve in Parliament, I've always kept my word and I've never lied. And I think that's important.
Madame May, il y a des gens...
Hélène, pour un moment.
If somebody on the stage is interested by the job.
Je pense que non, mais peut-être pas. Anyone on stage interested in the job?
I'm busy with my writing.
Yeah.
I've got lots of work to do.
And as interim leader, I can run for it.
Yeah.
Je ne suis pas intéressé pour être leader.
Et donc, ma question en suivi, c'est que le chef du Parti vert, M. Tyrrell, est intéressé par le job. Je me demande si quelqu'un ici a quelque chose à dire à propos de sa candidature, considérant qu'il a été très critique de votre parti.
Oui, oui. Mais ce n'est pas, à ce moment, ce n'est pas le moment de parler de candidats parce que c'est trop tôt. Nous n'avons pas actuellement publié les dates, les règlements. I don't know if anyone else wants to speak to this, but it's far too early to speak about any particular candidate. We have very good people who are thinking of running, and it's far too early to talk about.
De cette personne qui était très critique de votre parti, qui est sortie pour vous accuser d'être incohérente sur la question des sables bitumineux, est-ce que cette personne-là peut diriger votre parti?
Je veux dire clairement que je suis le seul chef et le seul député dans la Chambre commune qui a été arrêté contre les oléoducs. Je pense qu'il n'est pas une question de doute de notre engagement contre les oléoducs, contre les sables bitumineux. Nous avons un plan, mission possible. Il reste possible. C'est absolument nécessaire de mettre sur pied un plan pour l'élimination de notre dépendance sur l'énergie fossile. C'est clair.
Madame, sans parler d'un candidat en particulier, est-ce que le prochain chef du Parti vert devrait peut-être mieux parler français que vous? Parce qu'au Québec, par exemple, c'est revenu à plusieurs reprises. Le problème, c'était qu'on ne vous comprenait pas. Est-ce que le prochain chef devrait être bilingue?
Daniel peut peut-être parler de ça parce que je pense que ce n'est pas un problème. C'est la première fois que j'écoutais ça, que c'est un problème au Québec. Je pense que nous avons doublé notre vote au Québec, mais je pense que c'est essentiel d'avoir un chef bilingue. Mais
Absolument. Ça va être, je ne veux pas dire que ça va être un critère important, mais ça va être définitivement un critère très important. Je suis rentré dans le Parti vert pour faire du Parti vert du Canada un parti bilingue, un parti qui parle les deux langues officielles, et je vais continuer cette action au Québec et dans le Canada français. Et je pense que en 2020, ne pas être parfaitement bilingue comme chef de parti, c'est un non-sens. Et je pense que, rendu où on est dans notre histoire, je pense que la plupart des candidats et des candidates vont le comprendre.
Est-ce que vous pensez que l'imperfection du bilinguisme de Mme May a joué dans les votes au Québec? Parce qu'elle a dit que c'est la première fois qu'elle entend ça, vous?
Je pense que l'imperfection du français, d'autres candidats ont ici noté, et je pense que Elizabeth May, comme tous des Canadiens anglais qui ont pris la peine d'apprendre le français et le français politique et de débattre en français, devrait être reconnu. Mais un fait reste, on ne peut pas être ni leader d'un parti politique et ni être premier ministre de ce pays-là sans avoir sans être bilingue. Et je pense que c'est ça ce qui va arriver. Et je suis certain que c'est ça ce qui va arriver pour le prochain chef de ce parti.
Madame, can we get some more clarity, though, on the views that Mr. Tyrell has of your leadership? It's not just about oil sands, but he also feels that under your leadership, the Green Party, he believes, has gone to centrist, needs to be more left-wing, have more social issues that are more left of the political spectrum. What do you think about that?
I have no comments on his views. Does anyone else want to say?
Madame May, il y a des gens qui vous ont, Madame May, il y a des gens qui vous ont reproché la question de l'avortement, la façon dont ça a été géré, votre position que certains jugeaient contradictoire sur les sables bitumineux.
Non, je n'avais pas une seule position contradictoire.
Est-ce que vous admettez certaines erreurs?
Non.
Pendant la campagne?
Non, oui, j'ai admis d'erreurs, mais pas des questions d'incertitude. Nous avons, et toujours, j'étais claire toujours mes positions sur les questions de changement climatique, mes positions sur les questions d'avortement. Nous avons seulement le problème que nous sommes un parti, et je suis un chef, pas comme des autres. Je pense que c'est clair que les autres chefs vont faire les bons jobs dans les débats seulement pour répéter leur message, mais pas pour répondre aux questions. Je pense que les Canadiens veulent avoir quelqu'un qui réponde aux questions. Ça, c'est mon vue. I continue to think that leaders who do well by repeating message tracks that they've memorized are not as helpful in a democracy as those that actually answer the questions. So I admit the error of answering the question that Vashi Kapilo asked me. The question she asked me was, will you whip votes? The answer is the Green Party has a position passed by our membership that we don't whip votes. I would have liked to have had the conversation this election campaign. Do voters feel comfortable knowing that the Conservative Party whipped the votes and made every single member of Parliament vote in the 42nd Parliament that asbestos was safe? Do members of the NDP and the Liberal Party feel good about knowing that their leaders whipped a vote so that Stephen Harper got the mission bombing in Libya, which was a disaster for the world, that the bombing mission in Libya, every single NDP vote was whipped to vote for bombing. I was the only member of Parliament who did not vote to bomb Libya. Now, that says something about whipped votes. And I'm also aware that Mr. Singh, since he became leader, whipped a vote, and then, as I think many journalists will remember, punished David Christopherson to remove him as vice chair of the Committee on Procedure and House Affairs, because David Christopherson, with miles of parliamentary history and loyal to the New Democratic Party, had dared to vote for a very well, it was a conservative motion with no impact on anything other than to say the checkbox on the summer jobs program is a mistake. But excuse me.
Can I ask you, Ms.
Sorry, can I just finish this point, if you don't mind? So the question that I would have loved to have discussed in the election campaign was, why did the Green Party membership vote that we trust our members of Parliament, embedded in our values, to vote the way the Greens are embedded and absolutely committed, which would mean, as you heard from Jenica's opening statement, I was the only leader who showed up to protest the closure of the abortion clinic in Fredericton. Didn't see anybody else there. We are demanding that whenever we get the next cabinet, and we know who the Minister of Health is, that there be emergency funding to keep Clinic 554 open. I don't think anyone can fairly or honestly say that there was confusion. That doesn't mean that people didn't use parts of phrases to distort what we'd said to create the impression. But there was never, in any honest assessment of where we stand as a party or where I stand as an individual, there was no room for doubt.
On legislation, 2 questions, very brief, Ms. May. Comment is made last week by environmental labor groups that the $50 cap under the Greenhouse Gas Pollution Pricing Act should be repealed, should increase.
Yes.
Yes?
We said that during the election campaign. A carbon pricing system does not work if you cap the amount you're charging per ton.
So there should be no cap.
No, because it will cease to work. So unless you replace your whole pricing system and say we're not going to use carbon pricing, we're going to use regulation. Or we've decided, which is something that may happen if we continue to dither and argue about carbon pricing as if it's the equivalent of appropriate action, if we decided as a government, well, let's put a rationing system in place. No Canadian is allowed personally to use more than 2 tons of carbon a year. Figure it out. It's a new regulation. Then you wouldn't need pricing. But if you're using a pricing system, the price per ton has to go up every year.
And speaking of regulation, the next one to drop then would be Clean Fuel Standard. It was delayed until after the election. What has to happen in Clean Fuel Standard?
The Clean Fuel Standard needs to be brought into place. The methane regs need to be brought into place. Ideally, I'd like to see them toughened, but they need to be applied as quickly as possible. And we need to take fuel standards, which is not the clean fuel, but the CAFE standards need to apply to light vehicles, trucks, and SUVs. Every efficiency that we're making in improving vehicle efficiency with internal combustion engines is overwhelmed by the light truck and SUV vehicle.
Fuel standard, they say, wholesalers and industry say will double the price of natural gas. Is that your understanding?
What I would like to do, of course, is not rely on natural gas. We have to ban fracking. The UK just did. So the idea that natural gas is somehow not a fossil fuel is a dangerous lie. We are moving in the direction of more fracking. The LNG plant that LNG Canada, that is being massively subsidized by the Liberals, is a huge source of new greenhouse gases. So the price of natural gas is less important to us as Greens than shutting down fracking and moving off fossil fuels.
I'm wondering if you could just...
What's behind you? Todd hasn't asked a question yet. Sorry.
Ms. May, I know you're unique among party leaders, that you acknowledge the territory you're on.
Yeah.
But how would you grade how you've done as far as pushing Indigenous issues in the House during your career? And what are you going to do now that you're facing a minority government? Is there anything you're going to put on the table that you would support the Liberal government over?
Well, first of all, we went through, as a result of an article that has a number of errors in it, how often I'd actually spoken to Indigenous issues in the House. And given that Greens, with less than 12 members, have no right to speak in the House, I'd actually raised Indigenous issues more than other party leaders. So I think and I co-sponsored Romeo Saganash's bill. And I met with Jody Wilson-Raybould when she was Minister of Justice to urge the Liberals to support that bill. So I think I accomplished as much as or a good deal more than one would have imagined, given our position as the only Green MP in the House without the right to speak. So we can get you those stats if you want to see them. We will be pushing UNDRIP very hard. The letter that I sent the Prime Minister and copied to other opposition party leaders set out areas where we might have common ground. One was, since the House of Commons did pass UNDRIP, but it got delayed in the Senate by Conservative opposition, let's get UNDRIP in and make sure all our laws and regulations meet the standards of the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. Let's make it a priority to respond to the inquiry on missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. Again, this is spelled out in the letter that I sent to the Prime Minister. And of course, we have to respond immediately and cancel the appeal of the Human Rights Tribunal decision that there is specifically money owed for what the Human Rights Tribunal found to be reckless and willful, quote unquote, reckless and willful violation of the human rights of Indigenous children in this country.
Ms. May, how will it work for you as parliamentary leader? What does that mean? What role will you be playing in the caucus and the party going forward?
Well, it means that as in the Parliament of Canada, people will recognize, particularly in rotations of statements and so on, moments of shared recognition of events. I'll be the designated leader in the House to speak to issues, but I want always, because we're a grassroots and egalitarian party, I pushed Paul, as you know, he can tell you, Paul Manley spoke more often in the House of Commons in the time that he was there than his predecessor over the same period of time, and she was part of an official party with the right to speak anytime. I want Jenica and Paul to be as effective as possible so their constituents see them working hard in the interests of constituents. My role is clear. I'm leader of the Green Party of Canada in the House of Commons.
To ask you then, I mean, you're one of the top environmentalists in the country, if not the top, but obviously, I'm assuming you haven't lost the fire in your belly for that, but you'll lose the platform of being the Green Party leader. So how do you see that fight shifting down the road?
Thanks, Julie. I don't think it will shift much. Let's just be clear on the science, which is a great tragedy of this campaign, for which I will, now that I'm not leader of the Green Party of Canada, I hold the media to account for failure to deal with the science in the course of this campaign, for continuing to talk about climate change as though people understood it. It's as if we were having a debate on the economy where no one in the room understood inflation. You have to understand the science of climate change. We remain in a situation of deep peril. Human civilization, has a very limited window in order to avoid catastrophic levels of climate change that threaten the survival of human civilization. That's not hyperbole. That's science. We need to understand the science. We need to study the science. And that means understanding that we can't expand fossil fuel infrastructure. We can't build the Trans Mountain Pipeline if we're serious about protecting our children's future. We can't approve fracking or LNG Canada. We are up against a reality that is the carbon budget, atmospheric science, and you can't negotiate with physics. I'll be going to the COP that's now been moved from Santiago, Chile to Madrid. I hope that before that COP occurs, through citizen pressure, because there's a massive public movement in this country that occurred during our election campaign, we had 1 million Canadians marching on September 27th. One of them was the Prime Minister, protesting his own policies, I suppose. But one must not allow marching in a parade to pass as climate action. Climate action requires that Canada pull our current target, which is tabled with the United Nations by the Stephen Harper administration and unchanged. That target must be pulled before COP25, and I urge all the grassroots groups, whether they're Green New Deal groups or our time groups or wherever we find them, children, school strikes, must pressure the Liberals and the NDP, who have the power to deprive the Liberals of a vote of confidence. The Bloc, parties that say they care about climate, put your money where your mouth is and take it seriously, because we have to improve our target before December 2nd when COP25 opens. The Prime Minister can do that because it doesn't require a vote in the House. It can be done by executive order of Cabinet. And that's, again, part of the letter I wrote the Prime Minister. Our target is too weak. On doit augmenter le niveau d'engagement aussi au Canada. Notre cible avec les Nations Unies, dont l'accord de Paris, est absolument plus faible, absolument insuffisant. Et en même temps, le gouvernement libéral n'est pas déjà actuellement un plan pour atteindre le cible plus faible.
Yeah, but if you're running for speaker, you lose your platform.
I'm not running for speaker.
Not now, but you said maybe down the road.
Well, here's the thing. If we don't act on and I said this through the election campaign, when you look at the window of opportunity, the one chance humanity will have to avoid going above 1.5 degrees Celsius, and I know these statistics and these numbers are not great communication tools, but if we want to hang on to human civilization, massive changes, transformative changes need to be made in our economy, globally, and soon. By 2023, it's too late to make those changes. It's not too late now. And so we will continue to push and to fight, whether I'm leader of the Green Party, or past leader of the Green Party, member of Saanich Gulf Islands, or citizen at large who's worked my whole life for environmental protection. Right now, I'm not working to protect the planet. I'm working to protect the humans who live here.
Ms. Atwin, are you considering a run for leadership?
No. You know, I've got a very young family, and to add something else to my plate at this time is just not on the radar. But thank you.
Qu'est-ce que ça prend pour le prochain chef, pour être chef du Parti vert? Qu'est-ce que ça prend?
Yeah. I mean, she's an incredible inspiration, and she's given so much, and her leadership and the role that she's played should not be downplayed in any sense of the word. And you know, I'm very happy for her on this next part of her journey, and especially keeping the promise to her daughter. And so. We're prepared to work as a team and you know, with her as our parliamentary leader, but we'll see who the new leader will be and support them as well.
You have an entire year to make a decision. Is there no possibility of you taking a run at all?
I really need to focus on my constituency. There's a lot of work to do in Fredericton, and I just don't think it would be fair to them to even think about leadership at this point.
Le prochain chef du Parti vert, ça prend quoi pour pousser à la prochaine étape?
Est-ce que vous pouvez répéter votre question?
Your French sounded so good. I thought
Oh, thank you.
Really
I'm working on it.
If you prefer.
Sure.
What do you think the next leader needs to push the Green Party to the next level?
I mean, tenacity, bravery, the same qualities that I would use to describe Miss May and the leadership style that she's had over these past 10 years. It's just about continuing to maybe change the language and to reach further beyond our current support base, and to really, you know, encourage others from across the political spectrum to join us in this fight, and to just be, you know, again, strong and fearless. And I think that, again, to mirror the work that's already been done is a good step forward.
Ms. May, what do you make of the fact that, you know, you might be, you're the last female leader on the federal, you're the only female leader on the federal.
Yes, it's for quite a long time now.
We could be at a point where it's a return to all men.
Well, this is why I've avoided, to be very clear, the reason that any questions about potential candidates for leadership, I've avoided answering any of them. And that's because it would be inappropriate for me to say what I want to see in the next leader. I want our members to be engaged and excited about choosing the next leader. I know of some fantastic candidates who are considering running. Fantastic Indigenous women, fantastic women of color, fantastic men who happen to be white men. I always have to say that although I want to engage people of color and LGBTQ Canadians and Indigenous Canadians, I have nothing against white men, even old white men. I just married one. So this is the thing. They're really good, but I don't want to say who I want for leader because it would be quite inappropriate.
What's your number one legislative objective in this next parliament, and have you made that known to other party leaders?
Yeah, I think pharmacare is for sure as a legislative agenda. I mean, I'd love to see a climate bill with targets that are, you know, so that's a key. Climate action is always going to be the top thing. But where I see common ground and a potential to make progress is in pharmacare. I don't know how Jagmeet Singh thinks the NDP can bring forward a private member's bill on pharmacare because it inevitably involves substantial outlays of funds, which means it's not appropriate for a private member's bill. But it is something where we have the programs and the platforms of the Liberals and the NDP and the Greens speaking to the need for pharmacare. So surely, with the Hoskins report as a basis, we can move forward on that. We also must bring in UNDRIP. The United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People died in the Senate because of conservative opposition. That must come back, and I think that's another area of common ground. So while we will, to repeat what we said in our letter to the Prime Minister, and by the way, I am meeting with the Prime Minister in the week of Remembrance Day, but we will not ever vote confidence in a government that continues to ignore the severity and the urgency of the climate crisis. We can't. But we can vote on specific pieces of legislation where we see that in a minority parliament, Canadians want us to make progress. Canadians want us to be able to work together. And in the letter that, after consulting with Paul and Jenica, when I wrote the Prime Minister and the other party leaders, we put down the things where we think there's some common ground. We are holding a firm line on climate action for any vote of confidence. But where we can make progress in this Parliament, we will.
How far is Mr. Trudeau away from where you'd like to see the Liberal government in terms of climate action?
They're doing approximately half of what's necessary, somewhat less than half of what's necessary.
But can you be, sorry, just more specific, like as far
The
as
target, you can't achieve what needs to be done if your target is a target for failure. So we keep talking about it, and this is, again, part of the problem of educating. I'm sorry, I don't want to, I'm always mindful of what Paul Martin said, which was that a politician who criticizes the media is like a sailor who gets angry at the ocean. But the media of this country have failed abysmally in understanding climate science well enough to talk about it. Sorry. And that means that when it's continually repeated through an election campaign, that where the parties stand in relation to meeting the Paris target, and then instead of talking about the Paris target, all these stories tend to, there's been some exceptions for sure, but the stories then tend to conflate the Liberals' current target, which was Stephen Harper's target, as if it is the Paris target when it's not. Makes it very difficult for voters to distinguish which parties have a platform that actually gets you to where you need to go. So the current target for Canada, 30% below 2005 levels by 2030, is approximately half what's required to avoid climate catastrophe at the level that people don't want to hear about. The Conservative target is the same, but of course their plans are much, much worse than Liberal plans. There's no question the Conservative climate plan is how do you get off the cliff and have a catastrophe? Drive off the cliff faster, go with Andrew Scheer. Put on the brakes, but go off the cliff a little later, that's the Liberals. A little bit later, the NDP. None of them seem to understand that we're heading towards an abyss. We have to grab the wheel, turn hard, so that by 2030 and by 2050, we've avoided catastrophic, and it's, when I say catastrophic, I mean potentially losing millions of species, including our own. This is the sort of thing that should command the attention of people who claim to be ready for leadership. This is a moment where global leadership is needed. The United Nations Summit was, of course, Canada couldn't attend because it was September 23rd and we were in the middle of an election campaign. But in Madrid in December, Canada has an obligation to the rest of the world to stop being a laggard and to at least double our current target and put in place measures that put public funds into fighting climate change instead of taking $13 billion more to build a pipeline that drives up greenhouse gases. So, yeah.
Oui, j'aimerais juste avoir des détails sur le processus de la course au leadership. Combien de membres vous avez en ce moment et comment on va choisir exactement le nouveau chef?
Si d'accord, je répondais en anglais, si? Oui. So you asked about what the membership is looking at in terms of how we will...
Like how many members do you have and what's the process? Is it a one member, one vote?
20,000 members, so I was just checking to see. But we're really expecting that this leadership race will increase those numbers considerably. You know, you look at the million votes, 1.1 million votes that we did get across the country. We believe we will appeal to many of those voters to have a say in what new leadership looks like. The other thing that I think you can already see taking place here is that, you know, Elizabeth remains such a strong voice on the environment and on climate, and will continue to do that. She will be active in the House. It also means, though, that I can spend my time going across the country building the party and moving us towards this leadership. So I see this as a pretty good division of labor. Oh, the process, okay, so it's a very technical question that you have to be a member to vote. All Green Party members get a vote. We're still working on the technical side of the voting, but I know that we will have an announcement made at the convention in Charlottetown, so all votes will be tallied by the end of that convention.
One member, one vote.
One member, one vote? No. But it is a ranked ballot. A ranked ballot. It's a ballot where you have a preferential ranking. Yeah.
And we always include none of the above.
We do.
Ms. Atwin, I just wanted to ask, with your work history and your personal relationships, what voice do you think you'll bring to the House on Indigenous issues?
I hope to have a very loud and strong voice in the House on Indigenous issues. It's something that led me into politics to begin with. It's been my source of inspiration. And so it's, again, following in the footsteps of my family members who have come before me. So my stepfather is a strong Indigenous leader. My husband as well is an elected official in his community. So it's those voices that will, to help guide me along the way. I certainly won't want to speak on behalf of Indigenous people, but as a strong ally. I think the focus really should be moving forward. We're talking about reconciliation. It should be about Indigenous women's voices in particular, about leading that charge and having them kind of guide us towards this environmental sustainability and better stewardship that we really need to see. So I think that conversation, as with regards to climate change, goes hand in hand, and that's really something I'd like to champion in the House.
Ms. May, we know what your objectives are in the House for what you'd like to achieve. Where do you think you can help the Liberals, perhaps, or the other? In other words, when it comes to horse trading, what are you prepared to help them with?
Well, I wish we had more seats, obviously, or I wish they had somewhat less. You know, you never know the numbers or how it's going to work out. I mean, it's my colleagues in the Australian Green Party once had balance of power with one seat. One Green seat in Melbourne was what allowed them to really insist on a serious climate plan. What I would say is it's not so much for me as horse trading. We believe in being principled in our decision making. If it came to a moment where 3 Green votes were going to make a difference on balance of power, again, we will. Not balance of power, a vote of confidence. If it was a confidence vote where somehow the math worked out that there were 3 Green seats that were totally needed, we would never vote confidence without climate action. But we will, and we are very interested in working whether on committees to pursue the importance of the inquiry on missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, to get action there. We're very prepared to dig in deep to make sure we deliver on pharmacare in this minority parliament, to make sure, if we can, I raised in the letter to the Prime Minister the need for electoral reform. Can we find some common ground there with a system that could avoid the perversity of this election where we got 100,000 votes less than the Bloc Québécois around that, and they have 32 seats and we have 3, and the difference is, of course, that all their votes are concentrated in Quebec. So the unfairness of our voting system comes back to Canadians over and over again in the commentary since this election. I think it's time to try to get that back on the table. But in terms of and Jenica and Paul have a huge role in this. We work as a team. There isn't a hierarchy within the 3 of us, but our goals are always going to be progress for our constituents, progress for Canada, and where we can work with Mr. Trudeau or Mr. Scheer, Mr. Singh, Mr. Blanchet aussi. Nous sommes dans le Parlement de Canada maintenant 5 chefs. On doit travailler ensemble. So we're going to try to work together as much as possible where we can find common ground.
Do you think they'll be interested in, like, you don't hold the balance of power, so how do you convince them to hear you out on things like climate change?
We, as a party, are a voice of conscience on many issues. We're also the voice in the House that you heard on the streets when 1 million people marched. We are a voice that is allied with civil society and their demands. So we don't, through the power of 3 Green votes, barring a sort of a marvelous plot, maybe somebody can write the book, in which there's a massive snowstorm and somehow the 3 Greens in the House are the only ones who can decide if the government survives or falls. I mean, you can come up with scenarios, but they're highly unlikely. So I think that it's going to be through moral suasion and through science. There are a lot of members of Parliament. I want to say this clearly. There are members of Parliament in the Conservative caucus. There are members of Parliament in the NDP caucus. There are members of Parliament in the Liberal caucus who understand, a lot in the Bloc, who understand the science of climate change, even if their political party leaders don't. And we will be working as much as possible with caucus colleagues and friends in a minority parliament. I hope to see some of those caucus backbenchers in the Liberal Party who are exactly where I am in understanding how dangerous the situation is in which we find ourselves, how perilous it is. There are conservatives who understand this too. And we need to find a way in a minority parliament, while there is still time, to set partisanship aside. That's why through the whole election campaign, I was calling for the equivalent of a war cabinet that set partisanship aside and said this internal cabinet involves all parties and is determined to preserve the future for our children. It's not a political question. It's fundamentally a question of responsibility as grown-ups to protect the future. That's something that we will not stop doing. I think I can see that people are coming to the end of putting on coats and about to depart. A lot of us will stay around if you want to ask additional questions. Est-ce que quelqu'un d'autre de mes collègues? Anyone else have to say anything? You were going to say something. You want to say anything in Mi'kmaq?
No, I'm good.
No, okay, you're good? Okay. So for everyone here, Walalan, Miigwech, thank you very much.